My name is Layla, 37 years old. I live and work in San Diego, serving as the deputy executive director for a medical technology company. From the outside, people think I have it all: a solid career, financial independence, a stable life. But what they don't know is that within my own family, I'm nothing more than a walking wallet. That evening, I received an invitation to dinner. Just a family meal, my mother said, as if everything was fine. When my boyfriend and I walked in, the whole family was already seated around the table. Then a stranger appeared, a lawyer. My father smiled, while my mother gently placed her hand over Travis's, my younger brother, with affection. The lawyer said plainly, "We're going to read the will to avoid any misunderstandings later." A minute later, I heard my name, not mentioned at all. Every asset from the family estate, the vacation home in Arizona, to 2 decades worth of stock was left entirely to Travis. I froze. But it didn't stop there. From a hidden speaker in the room, a recording played. My mother's voice, cold and sharp. "Layla doesn't need our money. She's just a reverse ATM. Have you ever been turned into a tool by your own family? Have you ever given up your youth, only to be discarded in the cruelest way? If you've ever felt what I felt, leave a comment below. Hit like if you believe everyone deserves to be respected. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear the rest of the story, because what I was about to do next would make sure they never forgot my name. I didn't say a word. I didn't stand up, didn't leave the table, didn't react. I just looked straight at my mother. Her eyes didn't flinch, they even held a trace of challenge, as if waiting to see what I'd do with this blow. But what she didn't know was that I already knew. Every word spoken in that room, even the clinking of silverware, was being recorded by a tiny device, deep in my purse. Derek, my boyfriend, sat beside me, leaning slightly toward me. He didn't say anything, but his hand rested gently on my knee as if to say, "I'm here." I looked across the table at Travis. My brother, the only son, spoiled to the point that he never had to take responsibility for anything. He sat back, legs crossed, smirking like he was watching a play in which he starred. "You don't need it," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "You've got your job, your own house, your fancy car. What more do you need?" I remained silent. But inside, each word dropped like water on a lake already heavy with storm clouds. My father sat opposite me, silent the entire time. He simply gave the lawyer a small nod, signaling that the matter was settled. My mother picked up the thread, her voice laced with false dignity and a hint of pity. "You understand, don't you, Layla? Your father and I didn't want you to feel hurt, but Travis needs a start. You're already fine." I turned to Derek, and in his eyes, I saw restrained fury. He whispered through gritted teeth, "They actually did it?" I gave a slight nod and placed my hand over his. They did, and I was ready. The lawyer gathered his papers and stood to say goodbye. "I'll send the official copy for everyone to sign in the next few days. Thank you for your trust." I stayed seated until I heard the door close, then rose slowly. I set my napkin down, walked to the wine cabinet not to pour wine, but to pull open a lower drawer. I took out the mini Bluetooth speaker I had hidden earlier. "Perhaps everyone should hear one more thing before signing anything," I said calmly. The room went silent. I pressed play. My mother's voice rang out, clear and sharp. "Layla doesn't need our money. She's just a reverse ATM. The more we keep her out of the inheritance, the more she'll feel tied to the family. She'll think it's her duty." I turned off the speaker. No one said a word. My mother's face went pale. My father jumped to his feet, mouth opening as if to refute something but finding no words. Travis looked around, trying to laugh it off, but the sound was cold and metallic. Derek looked at me with unmistakable respect in his eyes. "Looks like I was the only one who didn't get a script," he said lightly, the only hint of sarcasm all evening. I didn't blame him. I too had been the only one without a script for years. My mother regained her composure faster than I expected. She placed a hand on her chest, voice trembling. "You set me up, Layla? How do you think that makes me feel?" I looked at her. I didn't set anyone up. I protected myself, because I knew if I didn't record the truth, I'd be blamed again as the ungrateful daughter. "You know I've always loved you," she said, each word sharp. "But sometimes love requires practicality. Travis needs a chance. You, you don't need anyone." I exhaled slowly. "And because I don't need anyone, I guess I also don't need to support anyone anymore, right, Mom?" Travis jumped up. "You're cutting us off?" I turned to him, my gaze no longer soft. "Starting tomorrow, you'll find out what earning your own money actually feels like." My mother stood. "You're going to abandon your whole family, Layla?" I didn't answer that question, because I knew they weren't asking to understand me. They were asking to pull me back into my old role, the obedient daughter, the financial provider, the one who never says no. I picked up my purse, gently shut the speaker, then turned to Derek. "We're ready." We walked out. The night air swept across the porch, cool but not chilling. Derek held my hand. He didn't speak, but the squeeze of his fingers grounded me. Before stepping through the gate, I turned one last time. "I'm not angry about the inheritance," I said loud enough for them to hear. "I'm heartbroken because I used to believe that if I gave enough, love would follow. But it turns out I was just a wallet." No one responded. The door closed behind us. I stepped off the porch, head held high. After all these years, I was finally walking out of that house with nothing weighing me down. No longer the good daughter, no longer the financial lifeline, no longer the sacrificial tool. Just me. And that was enough. We left that house in silence. Derek still held my hand firmly, but without rushing. I didn't need to look at him to know he was swallowing his anger for me. As the car pulled out of that quiet neighborhood, I leaned back in my seat, eyes fixed on the darkness outside the window. But in my mind, the past came rushing back like an old film being rewound. I remembered the year my mother had her accident. It was a rainy afternoon in October. My father called me, panicked. "Your mom fell down the back stairs, broke her hip. They're taking her into surgery." I was in a business meeting in San Francisco. Yet within an hour, I was on the earliest flight. I drained my entire savings, the one I'd been building to buy my first apartment, just to cover her hospital costs. No one asked if I could manage the money. No one said thank you. My mother just gently held my hand while still lying in her hospital bed and said, "I suppose you don't mind handling all this. You're still single after all." I laughed, thinking it was just a careless comment. Then came the time Travis dropped out of Oregon State. He called me around midnight, crying, saying he was depressed and couldn't keep up with the classes. I didn't ask for explanations, didn't scold him. I simply wired enough money for him to take a break for a few months and start over. 3 months later, he posted a smiling selfie from a camping trip in Yosemite with friends, full of cheerful captions. I said nothing. Then he re-enrolled in a different major. A year later, he dropped out again. He called bluntly, "Can you pay my tuition again?" "I promise I'll finish it this time." I sent the money again. I even bought him a used car to make getting to campus easier. That car? I later found out he traded it in for a newer model, said he needed to upgrade his social media image. As for my parents, they once told me they really wanted to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary somewhere memorable. So I booked their flights to Hawaii, got them a beachfront hotel, even arranged for a private tour. My mom called me from the hotel balcony, sounding like a kid who just got a gift. "You're so thoughtful. No one has a daughter as considerate as you." I heard those words, and I believed them. I believed that every time I gave something, it was filling a space of love. That I wasn't being used, I was just loving them. But as I sat in the car with Derek that night, those memories resurfaced in a different light. Not as gratitude, but as routine. A strange routine, where my family believed that as long as I had money, I could always be summoned back to fix any mess. "You okay?" Derek asked, eyes still on the road, voice even but filled with concern. I nodded. "Not sad, just feels like waking up from a really long dream." I really didn't think they'd go that far. I smiled faintly. I used to think I knew them, but maybe I only knew what they expected from me, who they really are. I might have never dared to really look. Derek didn't say anything more, but I knew he understood. He understood that sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from being hated. It comes from realizing that all the care you gave never truly found a place in anyone's heart. When we got home, I walked into the living room, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the sofa. The apartment was small, but it was mine. A place I bought with my own hands, paid for month by month, decorated myself from the nightstand lamp to every painting on the wall. I never bought a bigger house, because I was always saving for the family. Have you canceled the recurring transfers yet? Derek asked, pouring 2 glasses of water. Not yet, I replied, but I will tomorrow. Want me to sit with you while you do it? I looked at him and smiled softly. No need. I think I'm strong enough to hit cancel all on my own. I got up, walked into the bedroom, opened my laptop, logged into my bank account. My mother's name, my father's, Travis's, all there in the recurring payment list, each one from a few hundred to over $1,000 per month, stretching back years. I slowly deleted each line. My hands didn't shake, but my chest tightened with every click. Not because I missed the money, but because I had to admit I'd been used. I closed the laptop, walked back to the living room, and sat down beside Derek. I know you did the right thing, he said, but if you ever need a moment to fall apart, then fall apart. I'm right here. I leaned into his shoulder. I didn't cry, just sat in silence. In my mind, images of all the transfers, the pleading texts, the midnight calls, came rushing in, then dissolved just as fast. I had given so much, I forgot that I was also human, that I had the right to keep a little for myself, not out of selfishness, but because I needed to live, not just function like an ATM. Derek gently ran his hand along mine. I think you've just taken your first real step, I whispered back, and I'm not going back. But because I felt peace inside my own home, no longer fearing a phone call at 2 a.m, no longer worried about mom's utility bill, no longer bracing for a message from Travis asking to borrow just a little, I'll pay you back tomorrow, just me. And the steady breathing of the man beside me, the only person in this home who didn't need me to prove anything to be valued. And maybe that was the first time I ever truly felt loved. The next morning, sunlight poured through the bedroom window and woke me earlier than usual. Derek was still asleep, his face peaceful in the soft light. I got out of bed, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop quietly. The screen lit up along with a folder I had compiled over the past 3 months. Dozens of audio files, calls, voice messages, recordings of conversations with Mom, Dad, Travis. I had kept them all. Not because I wanted to expose anyone from the start, but because the unease had been building for a long time. And this was the only way I could hold on to the truth for myself. I clicked on a recording from a late April evening. My mom's voice, sweet and familiar. Honey, Travis is having a little trouble with his freelance work. Could you send him a few hundred to tide him over? You're not really spending that money anyway. I paused the recording. I remembered that night, clearly I was having dinner with Derek. And I wired the money the moment I hung up. Mom was right, I hadn't been spending that money. Because I gave it all to them. The doorbell broke my train of thought. It was Derek. He had just woken up, standing at the bedroom door in a wrinkled t-shirt, hair tousled with sleep. You're up early, he said, still groggy. I turned back to the screen, tapping lightly on the keyboard. Just needed to check a few things. He walked over and rested a hand on my shoulder. Are those the recordings? I nodded. I saved almost everything. Every time they lied, every time something felt off. I didn't want to question my own family, but I also couldn't keep carrying it all alone. Derek sat beside me, quiet for a few seconds. I used to think you were just incredibly strong, but maybe that was just a mask you wore for too long. I rested my head on his shoulder. I used to believe that. If I kept giving, kept being strong, they'd love me for me. Not for my wallet, not for responsibility. But the more time passed, the clearer it became they didn't see me. Only what I could provide. He gently squeezed my shoulder. Are you planning to use those recordings? I looked out the window, where the sunlight painted soft gold across the glass. I don't plan to go public unless I'm forced to, but I'll keep them. As armor. I'm not afraid anymore. Derek nodded slowly. If you ever need to use your voice, I'll be beside you. But Layla, you also need to learn to stand up for yourself. Not just with actions, but with words. You've been silent for far too long. I sat still long after he left to get ready for the day. His words lingered in my mind like a quiet reminder. I had become used to swallowing everything just to keep peace, to be the good daughter. But in doing that, I had disappeared from my own life. I opened a new note, typed, each line as if writing to the woman I was all those years ago. My name is Layla. I paid for their hospital bills, tuition, rent, car repairs, vacation flights, and hundreds of nameless transfers. I used to believe that if I gave enough, I would be loved. But in the end, I realized no one will love me unless I learn to love myself first. That afternoon, Derek offered to take me to his attorney's office. You need a reliable legal advisor, he said as we drove through the downtown financial district. I don't want you facing something bigger than you realize alone. We arrived at a tall red brick building with a polished brass logo above the front door. The lawyer's name was Benjamin, probably in his early 50s, with a weathered face but sharp eyes. After I gave him a brief summary, he leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced over his chest. Miss Layla, you have more rights than you've ever exercised. They depend on you, but they've given you no security in return. So if they ever attempt to defame you, fabricate stories, or do anything that compromises your reputation or safety, I want you to know, you can fight back completely within the law. I nodded, feeling as if someone had finally handed me a real shield. After the meeting, Derek and I stopped by a small cafe. We sat by the window watching the busy crowd rush past outside. I thought this would break me, I said softly. But right now, I feel more clear-headed than ever. Derek smiled. Because you're finally doing what you should have done a long time ago, putting yourself ahead of people who don't deserve it. I didn't say anything else. I just took a sip of warm coffee, letting the slight bitterness spread in my mouth like a quiet affirmation. I had abandoned myself for far too long. But starting today, everything would change. I wasn't looking for revenge. I didn't need an apology. I just needed them to understand that the money faucet, named Layla, had shut off, and they were going to have to learn how to live without it. I sat in front of my laptop, the light from the window casting a pale yellow streak across the desk. The coffee in my hand had gone cold long ago, but I hadn't taken a sip. On the screen, the familiar bank interface displayed the list. Recurring payment active. Mom's account, $1,500 per month, used for mortgage, medication, living expenses. Dad's account, $800, mostly vague expenses he never explained. Travis, 2 separate transfers, $1,200 and $1,000. One for living costs, one for a content creation project I had never seen a product from. I had been sending those funds consistently for nearly 6 years. Never missed a single payment, never asked a question, never received a thank you. I moved the mouse over the button that said Cancel Recurring Transfer. A quiet but firm sigh slipped out. I clicked. A message popped up. You sure you want to cancel all recurring transfers? I typed, yes. Each line vanished. Each one was a rope that had been wrapped around my chest for a third of my life. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. A minute later, my phone vibrated. Mom flashed on the screen. I wasn't surprised. I didn't hesitate either. I answered. Layla? Her voice was sharp, but trying to stay calm. Why wasn't the money transferred this month? I placed my hand on the table, keeping my tone steady. Because I stopped all of it, Mom. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then her voice turned harsher. What are you thinking? You know your father can't manage. Travis is still paying off the car. And me, I've had to cover more hospital bills since last month. Mom, I said slowly, if this family really can't survive without me as you claim, then that means for all these years, everyone's been surviving solely on me. Do you think that's fair? Don't say things like that. You make money, you should know how to share. Family means carrying the weight together. Exactly. Family means carrying the weight together. But for the past 10 years, who's been carrying it? Who paid off everyone's debts alone? Who canceled vacations, postponed buying a home, delayed getting married, just to make sure no one lost power or got a call from the bank? She went silent. I could hear her breathing hard, fingers tapping on a table. "You've changed," she finally said, her voice full of disappointment. "You're not the daughter I used to have." "I'm still Layla, Mom. I'm just no longer a walking wallet." She hung up. No more words, just a dry, mechanical beep. I set the phone down. My heartbeat wasn't fast nor slow. Everything felt strangely calm. 2 hours later, I got messages from Travis. "Travis, what the hell are you doing? My credit card payment just got declined." "Travis, you think cutting off money is some kind of joke? You know Mom cried because of you, right?" "Travis, let's see who even needs you in this family anymore." I didn't respond. I archived all his messages. I didn't delete them, just saved them, in case I ever needed proof. That afternoon, I took a walk through the park near home. The summer leaves had started to turn. A breeze brushed gently against my shoulders like a quiet pat on the back. I sat on a bench and watched people passing by. An old woman strolled past with a tiny dog in a raincoat, even though the sky was clear. Across the street, a woman was teaching her kid to ride a bike. Laughter echoed through the park. And suddenly, my chest felt light. No money requests, no loan reminders, no sharp-voiced demands. "Do you have any left?" Just me and the world I'd forgotten I belonged to. That evening, I came home and cooked a simple dinner: spaghetti, salad, and a glass of red wine. Derek arrived after a long day of meetings, tired but smiling when he saw me setting the table. "What are you doing?" he asked, surprised as I pulled a chair out for him. "We're having dinner. That's all," I said. No one calling, no one interrupting, no one needing cash. I think I deserve a quiet meal. He sat down and raised his wine glass, gently clinking it against mine. "To peace," he said. "And to freedom," I added. We ate in silence, but the kind that feels comforting. Not the tense, suffocating quiet of those old family meals, where everyone held a fork like it was a scalpel for dissecting responsibilities and expectations. I looked at Derek, then at the soft yellow light above us. A thought crossed my mind. Peace doesn't come from having more money. It comes from knowing when to stop giving it to people who never learned how to stand on their own. Late at night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. I unplugged the charger, powered off the phone, and placed it face down on the table. I stood up and stepped onto the balcony. The wind was brisk. The city lights sparkled, but the noise felt distant. Everything inside me felt still, not because I was hiding, but because I had finally learned how to set a boundary. And when we stop at the right time, sometimes what we gain isn't loss, it's coming home. Home to ourselves. A week passed in artificial quiet. I still showed up at the office, still joined Monday morning tech briefings, still managed dozens of emails and reports like usual. But that silence didn't last. It felt like a thin mist floating above a lake, one small stone, and everything stirs again. That morning, I walked into my office and set down my latte like always. But as I opened my laptop, I sensed something different in the hallway. Whispered voices, avoiding eyes. A few employees from accounting people I'd supported side by side for 2 years walked past, without a word. Eyes down, not even a nod. I opened my email inbox. An internal message from the HR department caught my eye. The subject line read, "Temporary suspension of financial system access. Internal investigation underway." I couldn't believe what I was reading. I read it again and again. A chill ran down my spine. I immediately called the head of HR, Linda, a middle-aged woman known for her principles and fairness. "What's going on?" I tried to keep my voice steady. Linda responded bluntly. "We received an anonymous report. Someone accused you of embezzling funds from an investment contract 2 months ago." We have to follow protocol, temporarily suspend your access, and begin an investigation. We ask for your cooperation. I heard every word. Heard it so clearly, it felt like my heart was being wrung tight. That contract was one of the projects I'd poured my heart into. I worked through Thanksgiving just to get it ready before the new budget cycle. I ended the call and pulled up the relevant documents. Every file, every number, every payment, everything was transparent. I hadn't mishandled a single penny. So who sent that report? I walked over to Derek's office during the lunch break. He was in an online meeting, but the moment he saw me standing outside the glass door, he ended it early. What's wrong? He pulled out a chair for me, concern in his eyes. I told him everything, in detail, leaving nothing out. When I mentioned the contents of the anonymous report, his expression darkened. Can you show me the email? I handed him my laptop. After a few minutes of reviewing, he typed a few simple commands to check the metadata of the anonymous message. Then he looked up, his voice low. The IP address from the email matches the same IP that's been used to log in to Travis's personal account. I froze. Are you sure? I whispered. I'm sure. And not just the IP, also the user agent, access time, and geolocation. They all match perfectly. If needed, I can even pull the ISP's access logs. I sat there, speechless. In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt a slow, cold ache spread down my spine. Travis hadn't just relied on me for years. He was willing to crush my reputation, fabricate a serious crime, all for one reason. I stopped sending money. I turned to Derek, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you think I should do? Derek looked at me for a long moment. You have evidence. You have logic. You don't need to shout or get even. You just need to do the right thing. Send the evidence to the police. Let them handle the rest. I nodded. That afternoon, I drafted a full report, attached all the technical data Derek had extracted, and submitted it directly to the San Diego Police Department. I didn't file an official complaint. I simply provided the information, asking them to verify the impersonation and defamation that had harmed my professional reputation. The officer who received the file looked at me with respect. Miss Layla, if what you've submitted is accurate, the other party may face criminal charges for impersonation, reputational damage, and spreading false information. I didn't respond. I just signed the report. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I drove along the coastal road, letting the sound of waves wash over my mind like a lullaby for a fury that hadn't yet erupted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just silently told myself that my quiet was no longer submission. It was the patience of someone waiting for the right moment. A few days later, the company's IT department completed their system log review. Linda sent me a brief email. We have confirmed the accusation was false. All your system access will be restored today. Apologies for the inconvenience. No public apology. No explanation from anyone else. But I didn't expect one. What I expected was justice. And it was. Coming. Slowly, step by step. 3 days later, I got a call from the police department. Travis had been summoned for questioning. They had contacted the internet provider to verify the information. And if he couldn't prove his innocence, the case would be referred to the district attorney. I didn't go. I didn't call. I just sat in my apartment, drinking a cup of warm ginger tea, thinking about the cruelest irony of everything I'd been through. To have one peaceful day, I had to walk through years of sacrifice and betrayal by my own family. I set down the cup, opened my laptop. The first window that appeared was a folder titled Backup Family. I stared at it for a moment, then right-clicked. Selected, rename. I typed, evidence. Because I had come to understand, what I once called family was now just a series of files proof enough to make sure I never returned to where I started. One Thursday afternoon, while I was fine-tuning a presentation for the upcoming strategy meeting, my inbox lit up with a familiar name, Marie Bennett. I stopped typing. Aunt Marie, my father's youngest sister. A woman who lived alone, taught literature at a small college in Vermont, and occasionally sent me Christmas cards even though we rarely spoke. I opened the email. Just one sentence. Call me. I have something I need to tell you. It's important. I picked up my phone, my hand trembling slightly, though I didn't know why. How long had it been since I heard her voice? I remembered the last time she came to my birthday when I turned 28, bringing an old leather-bound book with a handwritten note inside. You're the only one in this family I believe will never lose herself. I dialed. Before the third ring ended, her voice came through steady and clear, as if there had never been any distance between us. Layla? Yes, it's me, Aunt Marie. How are you? I'm well. But I really need to talk to you. Her tone. It wasn't urgent, but it had a quiet determination that caught my attention. I listened. For nearly 40 minutes, she told me something no one in the family had ever mentioned, not because they didn't know, but because they were never meant to know. My grandfather, Walter Bennett, a strict and private man, had left behind a separate inheritance before he passed. Not through the family lawyer, not publicly, not in the official will, just a handwritten letter addressed to Aunt Marie, along with a private savings account in her name and a note that read, "This money is not for Travis, not for Stephen. It's for Layla if and only if she chooses to leave this cycle." I held my breath when she said the amount. $750,000. I didn't say a word for several minutes. She waited, then continued, slowly and deliberately. You know what your grandfather was like. He didn't say much, but he saw everything. He once told me that, of everyone in the family, you were the only one who knew how to live for others without needing to show it off. My heart ached. I remembered that time he let me sit beside him in the backyard while he trimmed the lawn. He didn't say much, just handed me a cold bottle of water and said, "Whatever you do, do it right." I had thought it was a lesson about work. Now I realized it was a warning about life. But there's one thing. Her voice softened. You can only receive that money if you agree to one condition. I took a deep breath. What is it, Aunt? Completely cut ties. No more money transfers. No going back. No forgiveness. No remaining ties of any kind. You have to truly step out of that so-called family. You may care, but you will no longer have responsibility. No hope of changing them. I sat in silence, my mind in turmoil. I didn't regret the money. I had never lived for money. But that condition, it felt like a sharp incision through the part of me I had tried to preserve for so many years. Despite all the hurt, I had once hoped that one day my mother would hug me and say, "I'm sorry I didn't see you." I had hoped Travis would mature enough to call me just to ask, "How are you doing?" But now, there would be none of that. If I accepted the money, I had to permanently abandon any hope for reconciliation. You can think it over, she said softly. No need to answer immediately. But remember, this isn't a reward. It's an opportunity. An opportunity for you to live your own life, no longer as anyone's savior. I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, replayed old recordings of calls, read through every condescending message from Travis, reviewed the false accusation files I had faced because of my brother. I reread the emails my mother had sent. You're only thinking of yourself. You've changed. No one ever asked, "Are you okay?" No one ever said, "If you're tired, don't push yourself." No one ever thought that I was just a woman trying to live a life without anyone backing me. The next morning, I sent a brief email to Aunt Marie. Subject line, regarding grandfather's inheritance. Content, just one line, I agree. And thank you for seeing me, even if only in silence. A few hours later, she called back, her voice low but betraying relief. I'm so proud of you, Layla. Finally, you've chosen to live for yourself. I didn't cry, but my heart eased, as if someone had removed a backpack full of stones from my shoulders after an unbearably long journey. I would still remember them, I would still wish them well, but I would not return, not out of hatred. Because I had learned that some doors close not to punish, but to protect oneself from the harsh winds outside. and I had finally chosen to keep my peace. I had never been one to talk much about myself on social media. For many years, my personal page had only photos from outings, with colleagues, a few lines sharing a favorite book, or quiet work updates. But that night, sitting in front of my laptop, I knew it was time to say something I had intentionally kept silent about for nearly 10 years. I opened Facebook. The post creation window appeared. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type immediately. I stared at the screen for a long moment until I felt calm. Not out of anger, but because I wanted to write from clarity, not impulse. I began the first line. My name is Layla Bennett. I am the daughter of Stephen and Barbara Bennett, the older sister of Travis, and I want to tell everyone a story. I wrote sentence by sentence, line by line. No flourish, no resentment, no anger, only the truth clear and complete. I listed every expense I had silently covered over the years. $12,000 for mom's medical bills in 2017, $9,000 in tuition for Travis in 2019, $3,500 for Travis's used car, later followed by $7,200 when he upgraded to invest in a new SUV, $15,000 for the mortgage after my father missed 3 payments, $4,500 for flights, hotel, and meals in Hawaii for my parents' wedding anniversary, and $4,500 per month for 6 years, covering household expenses, bills, and necessities for the entire family. I continued. I never asked anyone to pay me back. I helped because I believed it was the right thing to do. But when I stopped, the only thing I received was a will that completely excluded me from the family's assets, accompanied by a plot to falsely accuse me of embezzlement at work, orchestrated by my own brother. I attached a recording from that dinner. In it, my mother's voice was unmistakable, unguarded. Travis needs money to live. Layla doesn't need affection. I wrote on. I stayed silent, for so long because I thought silence was love. But I realized that staying silent too long only makes others think you deserve to be treated poorly. I posted the entry at 9 p.m. No tags, no requests to share. I just needed to free myself from the burden of silence. At first, everything was quiet, but after just half an hour, the first responses began to appear. Former high school friends left comments. I always heard Layla carrying the family, but I didn't think it was this serious. A college friend messaged privately, "You've really lived with admirable strength." An hour later, the post started to spread. Relatives from all over left messages. We had no idea. They never said this. A maternal aunt commented, "Barbara, you owe your daughter an apology." Even strangers shared the post, with captions like, "This is why so many good kids choose to stay silent and leave in the end." I didn't respond to any of it. I just sat there, watching the comments, roll in like small waves brushing against old, healed wounds. It didn't make me cry, but it did ease my heart. Around midnight, I received a message from someone I didn't expect, my high school English teacher, Mrs. Peterson. She wrote, "Layla, I remember you as the student who always completed your work, even the parts others left unfinished. I'm sorry I didn't understand your life back then, but today, I am so proud of you." I couldn't hold back the tears. The next day, messages from my mother started flooding in. First, a call I didn't answer. Then texts. "What are you doing? Are you trying to embarrass the family? Are you destroying mom and dad's reputation? People are whispering. Relatives keep calling." I read them all, but I didn't reply. That afternoon, Travis sent a 2-minute voice message. He wasn't angry. He mocked. "Well done, you won. Now you think you're so noble? You have money, so you think everyone else is worse than you? Just wait. No one will be on your side for long." I didn't bother responding. No one said I was noble. I just told the truth. That evening, my father sent a short email. Subject line: disappointed. Content: only one sentence. "You have completely shattered this family. I hope it makes you feel lighter." I read that line over and over. Then I opened my phone and tapped on a note I had saved a few days earlier, where I had written down excerpts from my grandfather's will, every extortionate and sweet message from Travis, and all the evidence of the fake email. I added one more line. I'm not breaking the family. I'm just no longer carrying it on my back. I stood up and stepped onto the balcony. The San Diego night breeze was as gentle as always, but it no longer felt cold like the nights I lay awake worrying about how to send enough money while still covering my rent. I sat in my office, the late afternoon light casting across the ivory wall behind me, making a small room feel suspended, like the moment before a storm. The financial report I had just finished for the executive board was still open on the screen, but my eyes no longer saw the words. My phone rang and I saw my mother's name flash on the display. I hesitated for a second, then answered. On the other end came a quick, ragged breath, as if she had just run a long distance or had been crying. Layla, it's Mom. I remained silent. Can you listen to me for a moment? Her voice trembled, low, stripped of all pride. I'm begging you. Come home. The house? It's about to be foreclosed. I closed my eyes. In that brief instant, I felt what I had long imagined but never wanted to happen. My family was finally facing the consequences of what they had sown. The bank has sent 2 notices already, she continued. I've tried to manage. Your father is too sick to work, and Travis, I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. Travis is under investigation, Mom. I think you already know that. A long silence followed. Mom, you don't want to believe it. You think, he's just being childish. He didn't mean it. Didn't mean it? I laughed, a dry, humorless laugh. You're calling creating a fake email to ruin me accidental? Or you just refuse to admit that you always defended him, ignoring every boundary? You say that, it hurts me, she whispered. I inhaled deeply, then replied slowly, I don't think you ever heard as much as I did living like a shadow, working while sending money to support the entire family, only to be told I don't need affection. That's not what I meant. Really? I played the recording from my computer speakers, the very clip she had set it in, so it played in my ears. And now in hers? Travis needs money to live. Layla doesn't need affection. Silence. A soft sob came through. You were wrong, she said, almost whispering. I didn't think it would get this far. I miss you. I gripped the phone, but kept my tone even. Mom, when I was excluded from the will, did you think of me? When I was falsely accused, did you consider how I felt? When you watched everyone call me a traitor, did you speak a word of truth? I didn't know what to do. No, you did. You just chose to side with whoever made you comfortable. I looked out the window, the late-day sun glinting on the rim of my glass, sparkling. Mom, I said, my voice softer now, but detached. That house was never mine. Even if I paid the mortgage, repaired the roof, installed the new AC, I was always standing outside the door. Please, don't abandon us. I closed my eyes. A very small part of me, the little girl who had always wanted to be held, trembled. But I remembered the nights spent awake figuring out the money transfers, the mornings answering Travis's demanding emails, the meals my parents ate paid for by me, then calling me selfish when I kept even a small portion for myself. I opened my eyes, calm. I'm not abandoning anyone, Mom. Everyone chose their path a long time ago. Now I'm just moving forward on mine. I hung up, didn't wait for her to say another word. I knew I had severed the last remaining tie to that house. But instead of emptiness, I felt a stillness like the surface of a lake. A very strange peace. Nothing left to wait for. Nothing left to cling to. That evening, I sat in the corner of my small kitchen, cooking a simple dinner. Brown rice, pan-seared salmon, and some steamed vegetables. Derek was running late, texting that he'd stop by after his meeting. I poured myself a glass of white wine, set the plate on the wooden table, and played soft jazz in the background. No one knocked asking for money. No one complained. No one demanded I carry their life anymore. Just me. And my own kitchen. I didn't regret it. The family's financial. Collapse wasn't because I abandoned them. It was because they had never learned to stand on their own. And now, without me to prop them up, everything they built on expectation and selfishness naturally crumbled. I wasn't happy about it, but I was no longer in pain because I had chosen to live my own life. I received a call from Aunt Marie's office one weekend morning. The sky was clear and cool, early autumn air making me feel light, as if everything was finding its place. The female secretary's voice came clearly over the phone, letting me know that the transfer of the inheritance from Aunt Marie's account was complete. The entire amount my grandfather left, $750,000, was now officially in my name. I thanked her, hung up, and stood by the window for a long while. Outside, yellow leaves were falling onto the sidewalk with an almost serene rhythm. I had once thought that if I had a large sum of money, the first thing I'd do would be to buy a bigger house, travel the world, or quit my job to live slower. But now that it was real, I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking of women like me, those who had been or were living a life chosen for them by others. I opened my laptop and began typing the first lines of a plan. Phoenix Fund scholarships for women financially controlled by family or relatives. I chose the name Phoenix because I believed in the image of a firebird rising from the ashes, just as I had had to do not once, but many times. The fund would provide financial support for women wanting to study, restart, or escape invisible dependency from family. Not only through money, but also through legal advice, therapy, and independent living skills. Derek was the first person I shared the plan with. He silently read through the draft, then closed the laptop, looking at me with a gaze I had never seen in anyone else, both admiring and gentle, as if he understood every depth of my heart. I used F to love you for your resilience, he said, but now, I love how you use your own wounds to heal others. I didn't reply. I just stepped up behind him, hugged him, and rested my head on his shoulder as if all the words I had could stay unspoken. 3 months later, I and my team organized the grand opening of a community library in Lincoln Heights, a neighborhood home to many immigrant and working-class women. It was a refurbished 2-story building, with bookshelves, study corners, a quiet reading room, and a small space for private counseling. I chose this location because I believed knowledge shouldn't be a privilege of the wealthy or powerful. It should reach the places where people once thought they didn't deserve it. The opening ceremony was simple. I gave a brief, unembellished speech. I shared a little of my past and why I chose to start over here. Everyone listened attentively, clapping gently, not loudly, but sincerely. When the program ended, I stepped out, into the library's small backyard, where paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. Derek approached, holding 2 cups of hot ginger tea. We sat down on an old wooden bench beside a trellis of pale purple bougainvillea. He didn't speak at first. He simply handed me a cup and looked at me for a long moment. "You know," he said softly, "every time you step toward the light, I feel small not because I'm less, but because you are the only person I've ever met, daring to live a life of your own, even when no one stands by your side." I lowered my head, feeling a sting in my nose. "Layla," he continued, his voice suddenly softening, "I don't just want to be the one walking beside you anymore." I looked up. He knelt down, pulling a small velvet box from his coat pocket. Inside was a simple ring, not flashy, but so refined it made my chest tighten. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Not so you have another family, but so you have someone who will never ask you to give up yourself." I brought my hand to cover my mouth, not from shock, but because a proposal felt like an opening, not a binding. I nodded. No words came. We held each other for a long time in the backyard of that old community library. No pictures were taken, no flowers, no applause. But it was a moment I would never forget because it came not from expectation, but from freedom. That evening, back at my apartment, I sat alone in the living room. The lights were off. I left the window open, letting the breeze drift in, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the park across the street. On the table, alongside the engagement ring, were the files of the first 3 women about to receive Phoenix scholarships. One was a nurse whose brother had controlled her bank account. Another was a single mother whose husband's family cut her off for refusing to remarry. The third was a former student who dropped out after being forced to send all her wages back home. I read every line, every sentence carefully, then signed all 3 files without hesitation. I had once thought I lived for my family. I had once thought that sacrifice was the instinct of someone who knows how to love. But I was wrong. Sacrifice does not mean disappearing. Love does not mean remaining silent while others hurt you. One late afternoon, Derek and I walked along the Del Mar coastline, where waves lapped gently against the mossy rocks, and the sunset painted the water golden, like a painting slowly closing. The ocean breeze ran through my hair, salty and cool. We said nothing, just held hands and walked slowly. And in that silence, I heard my own voice more clearly than ever. I had once thought freedom was a luxury, reserved for those born into proper love. I, a girl raised to believe I had to be useful to be kept, had wrapped the idea of freedom in utility bills, in quiet, midnight transfers. I had been an umbrella for others to shelter under, never knowing I, too, was getting wet and cold. I don't blame my family for being imperfect. I'm only sad that they never tried to see me as a person with feelings. I was there, present in every difficult moment for them, but they only saw utility, never my heart. When I withdrew my hand, they didn't ask why, they were just angry that they lost something they had come to expect as a duty. I will never forget one time, when I was 25, the first time I said no to Travis asking for money to buy a car. My mother called, crying for nearly an hour, ending with, "What's the point of living if you don't help your family?" That sentence struck my chest like a knife, and from that moment on, I lived as if repaying a debt for having my own dreams. Now, looking back, I don't regret what I gave. I only regret giving so much before I learned to keep a part for myself. Sometimes, you don't need forgiveness to find peace. You just need to stop. Stop punishing yourself. Stop chasing approval from those who will never value it. Derek squeezed my hand gently, as if sensing the stream of thoughts flowing through me. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his eyes still following the sun dipping below the horizon. I turned to him, a thin but sincere smile on my face. "I think maybe my family didn't lose me because I was cold," I said softly. "They lost me because they never saw me as a person with feelings. To them, I was just a role, a walking ATM, someone not allowed to get tired." He said nothing. He just stopped, turned to face me, and cupped my face with both hands very gently. "Layla," he said, his voice deep and warm, "you don't have to explain yourself to anyone anymore. You owe no one anything. The only thing you need to do is live fully for yourself, every day, every breath." I nodded slightly, saying nothing more. A wave crashed onto the shore, the cold water splashing my calves, making me laugh. A real laugh, not forced. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed like that. We continued walking until the night fully settled. On the way back, Derek opened the car door for me as usual, but when I got in, he took a small piece of paper from his coat pocket, folded it into quarters. He placed it in my hand. "You should keep this in your wallet," he said. I unfolded it. Inside were words he had written in simple but careful handwriting. "You don't have to give everything to be loved. Some people only need you to be yourself." I gripped the paper in my hand, tears welling up but not falling. I felt light, lighter than I ever had in my life. That night, back home, I took out an old leather notebook, the one I used to track all the money I sent to my family each month. The numbers were still there, clear, dense, like tiny cuts across time. I didn't tear it. I just flipped to the last page and wrote, "I used to be a mobile bank. Now I am myself." Then I closed the notebook, placing it in the bottom drawer of my fine desk, not to forget, but to remind myself that some lessons should be kept, not because they hurt, but because they helped me grow. I turned off the lights. Outside the window, the city still glowed. But inside me, only one thing was present: serenity. Not for anyone, not for anything, only because I had chosen myself, and I never want to lose that again. If you've followed me this far, perhaps you've also quietly carried unnamed burdens within your family. Have you ever felt you had to be strong because there was no other choice? Have you ever wondered if, by stopping giving, someone would still keep you out of genuine love? I'm not telling this story to accuse anyone. I tell it because I believe there are many out there living in roles like I once did. Girls taught that sacrifice is their identity, while their own needs are selfish. People who remain silent, who endure, simply because they think it's love. But love is not the repetition of pain. And freedom sometimes doesn't come from forgiveness, but from letting go at the right moment. I'm not expecting everyone to agree, but if you've ever been in a position like mine, or seen a reflection of yourself somewhere in these words, please share it with me in the comments. I want to hear you, because every story deserves to be understood. And if you find these glimpses into family, endurance, choices, and courage meaningful, don't forget to follow the channel. I will continue sharing stories real, profound, and full of emotion about navigating life under the invisible ties of a home that once seemed familiar. Thank you for listening to me all the way through. I'll see you in the next stories.